Hi everyone, and welcome to the next video in this series on Shakespeare's Macbeth. In this video, we're going to look at a character who's actually not really a character at all. It's the porter. He only appears once in the whole play, and it's rarely covered in that much detail when students are studying it. Remember though, in order to achieve the highest marks, it's really important to be able to give sophisticated interpretations of the play and its characters, and being able to discuss the porter will really make your essay stand out. Act 2, Scene 3, also known as the porter's scene, is a curious one in Macbeth. Some scholars and critics have dismissed it as almost un-Shakespearean and therefore irrelevant. Others have identified the scene as simple comic relief after the murder of King Duncan in the previous scene, a contrast between the horrors carried out by Macbeth and the rude humour of the porter. The most common consensus, however, is that this scene and the porter himself is vitally important to the rest of the play and does much more than just get a few laughs from the audience. In summary, the porter is a servant of the Macbeth household whose job it is to answer the gate to callers. The porter has been up late enjoying the celebrations with King Duncan and the other guests, and so he is tired, but also hungover, having drank too much. When he hears the knocking, that of Macduff, who has come to wake the king, he imagines that the knocking is that at the gates of hell, and he is the porter for hell's gate. He imagines himself admitting 3 different sinners into hell. The first is a farmer who tried to make money by hoarding his grain in the hope that price would rise, but when the price drops, he realizes he's financially ruined and hangs himself. The second is an equivocator. There's a link here with the witches and their equivocation, and he's committed treason but tries to get himself out of it by telling half-truths. The third is an English tailor who has been condemned for stealing by making clothes with less material than he charges for. All 3 of these sinners are condemned to death, and the porter imagines welcoming them to hell. In defence of those who argue that the scene is all about providing comic relief after the intensity of Duncan's murder, the humour comes from the fact that these were all topical events at the time that Macbeth would have been first performed. The farmer who hangs himself on the expectation of plenty would have been despised by many as someone looking to profit on the regular food shortages of Shakespeare's time. Interestingly, Shakespeare himself was actually fined for hoarding grain in times of shortages too, while waiting for the best price. The equivocator is widely believed to be Father Garnet, a Jesuit priest who was hanged for his role in the Gunpowder Plot, the Catholic plot to kill James I shortly before Macbeth was written. Finally, the English tailor and the French hose refers to the changing fashions of the time when French hose became so tight-fitting that any skimping of material would have been noticed immediately. Therefore, the English tailor who has been cheating his customers for years finally gets found out when the fashion changes. The audience would have understood these references and are certain to have generated some laughs, especially when they are taken with the porter's later conversation with Macduff about drinking and sexual performance. But we can also look at the function of the porter and his scene in 3 other ways. Firstly, Shakespeare could be normalising Macbeth's crimes in the previous scene. By putting his actions alongside ordinary crimes such as stealing and greed and lying, Macbeth's actions don't seem big in scale, they seem cowardly and low, murdering an old man as he slept in his bed. Macbeth has become no different to an ordinary low criminal through his actions. It serves the function of lowering the standard against which Macbeth's crimes are to be judged. As the famous critic John B. Harcourt puts it, this process continues the association of Macbeth with a petty speculator, with a known traitor, and with a tailor. Macbeth's murder, then, is an ugly deed when put alongside these smaller crimes. So perhaps by listing these smaller crimes that condemn their culprits to hell immediately after the murder of Duncan, Shakespeare is trying to emphasise that Macbeth's actions are not otherworldly or noble or outside of the realm of consequence. They are lowly and common and ugly. But alternatively, Shakespeare could also be emphasising the monstrous nature of Macbeth and how he is, in fact, closer to real evil than these other criminals. The second of these 3 ways involves the conversation between Macduff and the porter at the beginning of the scene. The porter speaks to Macduff about alcohol and what it does to a man. He talks at length about sexual performance, how alcohol encourages a man to want sex but stops him from being able to perform. In Act 2, Scene 3, he says, it sets him on and it takes him off. It persuades him and disheartens him, makes him stand to and not stand to, in conclusion, equivocates him. It's clear that, for the porter, alcohol and sexual desire are vices that he battles with. He refers to being under the influence of alcohol, almost like demonic possession. There is no question that Macbeth does not share these vices. There are no references to Macbeth indulging in alcohol or women. Shakespeare here could be suggesting that the simple vices of the porter, alcohol and women, are not as bad as Macbeth's vices, greed, self-seeking ambition and pride. Macduff himself, when he meets Malcolm, echoes this when he suggests that Malcolm's vices wouldn't prevent him from being king until he says that he wants to destroy peace. According to Harcourt again, the simple vices of the porter establish an ethical distance between the failings of ordinary humanity and monstrous evil now within the castle walls. The third way of examining this scene is looking at it as Shakespeare echoing his message about free will, fate, and the sanctity of the state. When we examine the crimes of the three imaginary sinners, we see that they roughly correlate with Macbeth's own actions. The farmer's sin is self-seeking greed, the equivocator's crime is treason, the tailor's crime is theft of clothing that properly belongs to others. Again, remember here all the references to clothing in the play. Macbeth is guilty of all these sins also, and in each of these cases, the sinner's own actions led to their deaths. It is only logical that Macbeth's actions will also lead to his death. On a final note, there is something hopeful in the porter's speech. It doesn't appear so from the outset, but in all his descriptions of his battle with alcohol, where he describes a physical fight being too strong for him, though he took up my legs sometimes, this battle of an individual man against alcohol is won ultimately by the man when he vomits the alcohol up. I made a shift to cast him. Similarly, the evil in the state of Scotland would also be purged or removed, the killing of Macbeth. The porter, in many ways, is a representative of ordinary people, and he is looking to the future. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and that you found it useful. If you have, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. And do check back soon for more videos on Macbeth.